Given the diverse scope of startups we have today, it is only natural to engage all of them in a panel discussion that focuses on AI in the startup ecosystem. In addition to the speakers you just heard, we also welcome Jay Das and Anirudh Suri as panelists. Jay Das is Managing Director, President, and co-founder at Sapphire Ventures. He invests in startups which he believes are developing groundbreaking products and services and have embarked on their journey to become a company of consequence. Anirudh Suri is the founding partner of India Internet Fund, an early stage venture capital based in Delhi and New York. Previously, he has worked at McKinsey in New York, Goldman Sachs in London, and the Government of India in New Delhi. Once again, a very warm welcome to all our panelists. The discussion will be moderated by Dr. Shailesh Kumar, Program Mentor of the Data Science Program at Geo Institute. Over to you, sir.
Hi, thank you, Naman, and thank you to all the panelists for joining us today. We saw some very interesting demos, and I would like to sort of, congratulate all the three startups for making it this far. I know it takes a lot of courage, a lot of perseverance, a lot of passion to come to this stage, and really congratulate all of you for solving such important and relevant problems of the day. And so what I will do is, and also I want to welcome the two panelists from the VC side, and we are very fortunate to have them here to give the VC perspective on the whole startup ecosystem. So without further ado, I would like to start, but before we start, I want Akrit to show how an AI engine would conduct a panel discussion. So what we are going to do, Akrit is going to show, how an AI will generate a question as well as answer a question. And, we all worry about losing our jobs. And, it's almost here that, in the future, such panel discussions can be done by AI itself. So, Akrit, over to you. And then we'll continue on our regular program.
Yes. This is supposed to be fun and not scary. So the idea was that sorry, it's my daughter very clearly. This is what happens right in virtual panels. But yeah, so as everybody knows, we've in the recent 2 months, the one part of AI that has been in a lot in news has been the GPT-3 model that has been launched by OpenAI. So we at Haptic managed to get access to this about 4 weeks back. And mostly my co-founder and me, we've been playing around with it in terms of testing its capabilities. So while we were preparing for this panel, actually Sean had an idea that, we should let GPT-3 try to be the moderator and the panelist. So I'm going to screen and attempt this. Don't try this at home. Sorry, 1 second. Share the screen. All right. So this is what is the GPT-3 playground. So as you can see, it's launched by OpenAI, and I'm on actually the OpenAI website, and this is where you can put your commands and set up and do a bunch of things. For quick background, GPT-3 is built on some 175 billion data points. It leverages a lot of historical data across the world to give answers. There's a bunch of sentences here which I've already done. So let me now enter a few things. So the way it works is, okay, fine. What is the session? The session is about panel discussion on the AI startup ecosystem in India and US. We can put some more context. Let's give it some more data so it can figure it out. So let's at least put a description. Let's see, startup founders and investors coming together to discuss fundraising challenges.
You should deliberately make a spelling mistake.
What it takes to. This is not haptic. I'm not confident of that it'll catch spelling mistake. What it takes to build an AI startup. All right. Now we're going to do sample questions. Okay. I'm just going to enter one more. All right. I'm going to submit and let's hope this works. Boom. There we go. Shailesh, I've done your job.
Yeah.
We can start.
All right. Can you read the first two questions? I can't. It's too small for me.
Sorry?
Can you please read the first two questions?
Sure. The first question is, how did you raise your funding? What were your challenges? What are the funding trends in AI?
Great. Awesome. So, to all the audience, right? I mean, obviously, OpenAI is a great revolution almost, and you can see where we are in terms of the sophistication of AI, and therefore it makes sense to sort of talk about AI as a theme going forward. So now, what I'll do is I'll start the panel discussion with our founders first, and the first question is to our founders. And startup is like a birth of a new baby. It starts with an intuition, and then it thrives with your passion and love, and then it becomes a thriving business at the end. So, I really want to know, what were you thinking when you started your company, right? What the hell were you thinking, right? And that's what I get asked when I was doing my own startup. That and like Sean was saying, everybody didn't believe him in terms of his vision, and that is really a good place to be, where everybody laughs at your vision, and then you build it up. So to all of you, maybe we'll start with Sean in the same order as we presented, so there's no confusion. What was your motivation to build your startup, and what were some of the challenges you faced in your early days in doing that?
No, it's a good question, and I've started a number of companies over the years. Outlier is the latest one, and I always do wonder about what brings me back to it. It's interesting for me. The motivation to start my first company was somewhat unique in that I wanted to work in a business that I felt treated employees differently than most companies do. That really valued input, gave people the freedom to be creative, have big impact, and I worked a lot of places that were not like that, and I felt like I needed an opportunity to create an environment like that. And that became my primary motivator to start companies in the first place. I think, though, I didn't realize how hard it was when I first got started, and there are a lot of challenges. If you look at Outlier, even with many years of experience and building successful companies before, the same challenges exist for me today. Like I said before, people were skeptical. I talk about a vision for what Outlier could do, and people didn't believe me. It didn't matter about my resume. It didn't matter about my experience. They just were very skeptical it could work. I had many investors tell me I should go back and work on one of the things that my other companies did, because that's what I knew well, and this sounded too out there. The second hardest part, frankly, is once you have this vision, you have to get it far enough to be successful. And how do you recruit a team? How do you inspire people to leave their jobs and come work on this crazy idea with you? People talk a lot about fundraising and how hard that is, and it is hard, don't get me wrong. I've raised many rounds of funding, and they're never easy. They always seem to get more difficult, actually, as the years go on. I'm not sure if I just am getting old, but recruiting your initial team is the hardest part, because you have a vision, you have an idea, but you don't have a product yet, you don't have a business yet, and especially in AI, it may be a while before you get there because of how hard it is to build them. How do you convince those initial people to jump on and help you? It's very hard, and I don't think it ever gets easier.
Shailesh, I think you're on mute.
Aditi, would you like to go next and share your motivation, why you started Imbibe?
Sure. So, Sean, I empathize with a lot of the stuff that you said, right? So, I think for me, Shailesh, is very simple. I know that you and I had the opportunity to work together a little bit because your startup was in education as well. For me, the biggest thing was, why is there information asymmetry in the world? And I realized that the simplest reason why people don't reach their potential is because they don't know stuff, right? And I think getting educated in the US kind of gave me a sense of the asymmetry that exists in terms of feeling special between the East and the West, if you like. Because in the East, we're all about I just have to achieve it. I just have to get there. And I'm not thinking. And in the West, we're like, I'm going to get started when I get started and we think, right? So I said, how do you bring that feeling of being special and the right information at the right time for decision making, to our part of the world? So then the question was, how do you create that context? So actually, I started thinking about an NGO, okay, that I'm going to get information to people and whatever. And then, somebody asked me, how big is big? I was like, it's the whole universe. Then he said, oh, you got to think about tech. I said, all right. So I started thinking about a simple product, and I chose test prep because it's a market where people pay, you know what I mean? Because that's what the investor said. So I started out, but my problem was, when I started out, I was just like, hey, you're ignoring these subjects and they're important subjects. So I had tags. And when people looked at that information, they changed their behavior. So that was the product, and people would pay us, 15,000 rupees, which is about $200 for that for a year's access. I was like, this is great. And then what happened, Shailesh, is that I started to observe changes in behavior that led to marks accelerating up. And I was like, wait a minute, it is possible to do learning outcomes too if you give contextual feedback. And then I had a moment, and we were the first startup to raise 5 million within 10 months of starting up, right? The company. And then I had a moment of reckoning with my investors. I said, because you were talking about challenges, right? I said, you know what? I don't want to monetize. And they're like, what do you mean you don't want to monetize? I said, I want to make the product free. They said, why do you want to make the product free? I said, because I want to know how to improve students, because I started with a no regrets NGO agenda, right? So I think for me, the challenge in the early days was everybody was building channel, content, and a sales engine. And I wanted to build a platform that can spontaneously improve people. So the question is, how do you take, the village along with you? And I was, fortunately, I had some pretty understanding investors and some not so understanding investors, but, we kind of managed it, right? And because I feel like you can't be in Washington and hate politics, right? So it was my job to sell the vision, to build what I wanted to build. And I was stubborn about the platform in year one, and, and then sort of met with the Geo folks, and they were like, bingo, this is what we should build. And then it accelerated. So I think for me, 3 things was the challenge. One was the cost of data acquisition and funding that in a market that largely chases revenue, right? The second, I was never an AI company. So the first time I realized I had to build an adaptive algorithm, I just knew personalization made sense because I wanted people to feel special. I had to make a phone call to a guy saying, how do you build an adaptive algo? So from there to the demo that you saw right now, right? So it was the journey to progress into AI because there's no other way to personalize to that level. And then the third was getting people like you, Shailesh, on the phone saying, hey, could you give me 5 minutes to figure this out next, and to where we are today. So this is it. But I think, it's been quite a ride. Like I said, it's our birthday. And I just want to add one more happy news. We just got selected as a global innovator by the World Economic Forum, so I'm super excited about what's to come.
Wow, congratulations, Aditi. Very nice. Yeah. And I've known you for a long time, and I've seen your journey, so it's very inspiring. And I want a lot of people out there to see your journey and get inspired. So thank you for coming here and sharing your story, and we'll talk more. Right, Akrit, how about you? How did you get started, and what was your trigger?
Yeah. By the way, the funny part on this panel is that 3 out of the 5 other people have known me since I started or before. So Jay, good to meet you. But Anirudh, Sean, Aditi, and I individually go back at least 8-10 years or more. And again, another funny part of the story is to answer your question, Shailesh, how I got started. I was working before this for the company that Sean founded before this. So that's your answer. So whatever Sean said, that's all the same things why I got started. But yeah, so obviously back in the day, mentors or people like Sean is who I looked up to in terms of how they built their companies and other things. Let's see, at Haptake, and some of my friends over here will tell you, we've as a startup, we have gone through every single thing that a startup deserves and does not deserve. We have seen every single high, low, stories of credit cards being maxed, stories of loans being taken and not being paid, everything in the sense that because I'll tell you the fundamental reason behind that, and there's a lot to learn. Honestly, nobody else should do this what I did. Again, everything that I'm talking about here, you should not repeat those mistakes. But I think for us, one of the fundamental things and a mistake I made as a first time founder was I started out with an obsession for a technology and not really a problem. And I think that's a very, very big thing for me that I've learned now over these last 7 years. We turned 7 last week, by the way, Aditi. So I guess it was back and forth. We started with this idea that, look, I love, it was almost like I came and told my co-founder, I love conversational AI. And he was like, what does that even, mean? And how is that going to translate to things? So I think, we took the technology, and for a long time, we were trying to take the technology and make it meet a problem, which really almost every seasoned founder or every investor will tell you is really not the best way to always look at things. You want to start with who's the customer, what's the problem, and then work backwards. And I think for us, it was, look, we really think this technology can do something. So that took us a long time. It took first 3 years to build the tech, and then it took another 2 years to find the problem. So till about 5 years in the company, we were in the 0 to 1 stage, just finding what might be the product that customers may like. And then over the last 2 years, things have now taken off in sort of what you see over here. It's been, I can go on and on in terms of, like I said, it's been every part of the roller coaster that a startup can give you. There's a lot to learn. I think if there was one thing you asked in your question, that what was the real hard part when you started, I actually think the hardest part was getting our first customer. I think that and actually getting a first paying customer. There's a lot of people who will be okay to do a free POC, and that can continue, but getting that first check in the bank and monetizing the product was a special feeling. That felt better than I got when I raised money, by the way. So.
Of course, yes. It's like having a child taking your first baby step, right? For the first time, it can walk on its own, and that is what till then it's working on VC money and your family and friends money, and then first time it is on its own feet. That's obviously a great moment. And you brought up a very important thing, that a lot of people are coming from either a hammer mindset or a nail mindset. And I think, when you're in a startup mode or an entrepreneurship mode, you need to start with a nail first and say, what problem am I solving? Because technology will come. And, Sean has identified a very beautiful problem, which is very subtle. A lot of data scientists don't understand that. People who build dashboards really don't understand that asking the right question is more important than figuring out the right answer. Asking the right question is more important, especially when you are in the sea of data. And very beautiful. So I just wanted to share a quote from Dr. Abdul Kalam at this moment. He said, "A dream is not what you get when you sleep. A dream is what doesn't let you sleep." And I think all co-founders, all founders who have persevered can relate to that. And I can see, all the passion that you bring to what you do. My next question to the founders, and then we'll go on to the VC side of the story, is, as startups are evolving, you've been there for 5 years, 7 years, 8 years. And obviously in this time, two things have changed, right? One is the technology landscape has changed. What technologies were available when you started your journey and what is available today is very different, right? GPT-3 has come. How does that affect a chatbot company or a conversational AI company is a very big challenge to look at. And obviously the market fit that you thought was, like Aditi was saying, NGO versus paid and press prep versus whatever. So both the things are changing and evolving all the time, right? And it doesn't gel with your initial vision all the time. And you have to adapt to how technology is changing and how the market is changing, how the competitor landscape is changing. And, if you want to share any anecdotal example of how you adapted from your original vision to what it became later, right? And, that'll be a good insight for our budding entrepreneurs to hear. Sean, we'll go with you first.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic point, and I think Akrit actually summarized it well, which is if you start with a problem, A lot of that adaptation comes easier than it would if you started out loving a specific technology or loving a specific product. So when I started Outlier, this problem of trying to find questions in data, I will be honest with you, even with a graduate degree in artificial intelligence, I didn't know if it was possible. I didn't know if you could build software to do what I was trying to do. And if you could, I had no idea what it was going to look like. And the first 6 months of Outlier were really my co-founder and I renting ourselves out as consultants, going to companies saying, we're just humans, but give us your data. We'll tell you what kind of unexpected things we find, and let's see if it works. And from there, after we saw that was working really well, we tried to build products that did it. And the first, honestly, 4 products we built were really bad. Awkward actually saw them. They were pretty embarrassingly not very good. And it took us that 5th one to really find something that we felt had potential. But because we were focused on the problem, not on the solution, it was okay to throw away solutions. We literally just threw away those first 4 products. And as time has gone on, as new technologies are available, things that weren't possible before, we've been able to embrace them because, again, the problem is what matters. And the solution is a way there. In fact, I showed you the Outlier product today. I feel like we're only a few steps into a much longer journey. I think a year from now, 3 years from now, the Outlier product will look a lot different. It'll be even more powerful. And that's good. I don't feel loyalty to how it works and how it looks today. What I feel loyalty to is, can we solve that problem for our customers?
Yep, great, very nice. And yeah, I think, they say that, great leaders are those who hold on to an idea, but, are willing to adapt very quickly as their notions change. And that flexibility, that openness, that agility in an entrepreneur's mindset is very important. And that is something that we are learning, right? Aditi, how about you? You already talked about the transitions a couple of times you did, but, please feel free. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say we are a proud haptic customer. I just wanted to say that. Okay. See, he's smiling. He's big smile. Okay. And we're actually building like a very powerful AI-based chatbot for education working with haptics, which is exciting. Okay. So I think for us, it was about 2 things. The first was that, EdTech, even today, 99% of it is using technology which is 20 years old. Right? So in the name of access, people don't want to personalize because they are literally putting content and SD cards and selling that. And for ginormous amounts of money. So the point was, the first thing was, how do you define the problem? Because we started with the problem, right? And how do you lend the problem's definition to technology? So for example, we all know learning is connected, right? So everybody understands 10th grade is related to like what you learn and the alphabet comes before everything. But there is no empirical way to establish it. So what happened with me was, because unfortunately, even though I did my engineering, like I basically adopted a mindset from it more than, like programming and everything. I'm very good at debugging though, okay? And then I got into sort of sales and business development in that sense. So I really wanted to build something that really, really works. So when I started out, a lot of this stuff was basically on paper. So if I can just take one example around building the learning outcomes journey, right? So we said, okay, when we're looking at students engaged with the information that we provide to them, their scores are going up. So is there correlation or causation between the two? So I started running regression models on an Excel because they teach you that in banking, right? And after that, the Excel started crashing. So I got my first data scientist on board. I said, please, can you run it in R? He ran it, and we realized that there was a 95% adjusted R-squared relationship between the inputs you were looking at and the outcomes you were looking at, which was the first learning outcomes patent. Then when we were sitting and saying all learning is connected, there was a chapter-based connection or a concept-based connection, we understood there are graph databases we could adapt that entire thing to, right? So that was like the first part, which is a large amount of it was a lot of technology already in use across multiple industries, but not being used in education for whatever reasons, right? Because we didn't want to build just a consumption platform. We wanted to build a feedback loop, and we realized the feedback loop's efficacy determines learning outcomes, right? So for me, that was the first phase. Now, from the last 1 year, we have started investing in a deeper platform layer to adapt a lot of this stuff to education, in a much needed way. So for example, you have Google Translate, you have GPT-3, but it doesn't work for education because the models run differently, the training data is different. Right? So we're building a vision platform, we're building a natural language platform, to specifically solve deeper problems like theoretical evaluation of questions and blah, blah, blah. So we only got there about a year ago when we understood how everything's coming together. So I think that's basically the way our adaptation, our adapting to technology kind of happened.
Very nice. Yeah, I think keeping up with technology and finding opportunities for using the latest technology into your product and solution, you have to have an eye for that. And I think that is one part of what I call an entrepreneurial creativity,
Yeah.
right? It's not just about sticking to a solution and a set of technologies, it's about being adaptive at that bridge between technology and solution. Right?
So one very
Yes.
before we transition to Akrit, right? One thing that's really worked for us is we've hired experts all over the world to give us advisory input on stuff like natural language search, etc., with execution teams on the ground in India. So that's been one very agile model at low burn that's helped us develop tech. Just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, very nice. Akrit, you want to share your journey and how you adapted? You talked about how you made a couple of transitions from being a technology company to a solution company and all that. You want to expand a little bit on some of those themes?
Yeah, we pivoted 4 times. So let me start with that first. The classic startup pivot, and that's what happens again. Back to the same problem. That's what happens when you're starting reverse, taking a technology and trying to find the problem. So the first product that we ever built, which a lot of the audience even till today remembers Haptic for, is we built a direct-to-consumer digital assistant. So we were trying to build, a local competitor to Google Assistant, where essentially you could just simply message saying, hey, find me a nearby ATM. I want to book a flight. Tell me a joke. What is my horoscope? Show me some videos. Everything in natural language, two-way conversation. And we were a direct-to-consumer startup. It was as direct-to-consumer as it gets. Then the first pivot came where we became a little bit more e-commerce. So we were doing all of these queries like Google Assistant type. And then the first pivot was to move away from that and become a holistic one-stop shop conversational commerce app. So here we were actually doing payments, transactions for all of the people who are familiar with the Indian ecosystem. We were doing cashbacks. We were doing tons and tons of cashbacks to try and get customers, which basically wasn't working. So that was pivot number one. Pivot number two was, okay, look, this may not be working. Let's start trying to build a conversational advertising platform. So, a hangover from my previous job when I was at Sean's company where we were building ad products. So that was the second pivot that, hey, look, can we like throw ads on top and actually make money through advertisers? And then finally, where we are today, which is pivoting into becoming a software as a service for enterprise customers to enable customer experience and customer service solutions. So yeah, Shailesh, I mean, look, any startup, every single startup that any one of us will know would have had a similar journey. The question really is how you all make mistakes. I think the question is how less does each one make? I think it really comes down to just that, which is ultimately if one person makes many mistakes and keeps making them repeatedly, it takes a lot longer to figure it out. I think the lesser mistakes you make and you don't make them as often, it's better. And then look, it's all we've all seen this repeatedly, and it's repeatedly talked about. It's cliche that nothing really beats sheer perseverance. When you're on that third pivot and you're trying to realign 150 people to tell them that no, this is actually going to work this time. You have investors who are wondering that where is this going to go. You have to be the single person in the room who still has to feel like this is the most exciting thing that is ever going to be built. So yeah, and I think it's something that over a period of time, I think you just get good at.
Wow, amazing. This is a very heart-to-heart uh, conversation that you just talked about. Really, what the loneliness of a leader is when you are not sure about what you're doing, and still you have to keep doing something and then keep the whole ship going. I think that's a very delicate part of leadership. That's where your true character and your true strength from inside shows. And thank you.
Every founder or every good investor will tell every other founder ever always that is why the job of the CEO is the most lonely. And I remember Sean's told me that when I was starting. I remember my other investors have told me that across every single time. And the question then you ask yourself is, why didn't anybody tell me before I started?
Yes, yes. And that's why I think a great teacher or a great leader is not somebody who can be taught through an MBA program or a B.Ed. Great leaders are just born great leaders, and they have this thing in them which makes them different than a lot of us. And so now let me take this conversation to our VC side of things, and I want to get a lot of perspective from Jay and Anirudh. So obviously you guys have seen a lot of startups. You have made some very high choices about which company to fund and which not to fund. And once you fund, obviously you are almost as worried and anxious about the success of the startups you have funded. Will they succeed or not? And everybody's in an ambiguity mode all the time. That's what I have sensed from a startup ecosystem. And so I just wanted to open up the question to both our VCs here. One question is around, how do you decide, what is that trigger, what is it that you're looking for in a VC pitch or in a co-founder or in an idea or in a solution? What is it that clicks with you and says, oh, this is a good thing that we should invest in? So that's my first question. And the second question is, once you have invested and all of that, how do you help and handhold your startups to keep going forward? Because you have seen other founders making certain mistakes. You have acquired a lot of domain knowledge in this area. So obviously you have a lot of wisdom to share with your founders. And how do you as a VC kind of come in as a village to raise the child, not just the parents who are the founders to raise the child, right? So those two questions. Over to you, Jay. You want to go first? Or
Sure. Happy
yeah.
to do that. First of all, thanks for inviting me. It was great to hear Chris, Sean, and Aditi talk about their journey as an entrepreneur. In some ways, although we are now investors, having built the firm out from scratch, we kind of have some empathy with all the entrepreneurs, how they go about building their firms and their companies, right? Um, so in terms of how do we fix where we invest, which companies we back, right? I think fundamentally it boils down to team and the people, right? Even though we invest a little bit later stage companies, companies with 5-10 million in revenue ARR, what we have found is ultimately it is the team that goes in and makes a successful company. It's never been the case that a bad team has made a very successful company and been created something that is a company of consequence, as we call it. So within the team, one of the um, things that we try to identify is really the culture of the company, because at the end of the day we invest in software companies, and for us basically software companies are nothing but a lot of people developing products, selling the product. It's all digital mostly, and then together with the culture, right? So how this culture of the company is, how they kind of go over bumps in the road, how kind of the democratic the whole management team is. Those are all things that makes a big difference for us when we invest. And once we invest, right, for us it's almost like, as the common thing that people say, like you invest and you're kind of like getting married to somebody, right? Because you're basically going to be on the journey for the next 7, 8, 10 years, right? So we spend a lot of time working with the CEO and the management team, and we actually in our firm have a dedicated organization which is actually larger than the investment team, that is all focused on helping our portfolio companies find customers, recruit talent, marketing and things like that, right? And I personally, with all my portfolio company CEOs outside of board meetings, probably spend at least an hour to 2 hours a month, or actually more bi-weekly. So yeah, about 2-3 hours a month, just kind of chatting and understanding what they are doing and basically being a sounding board. Because one of the things with as a venture investor, it's very hard. Like I know that being a CEO is a very lonely place, but on the other hand, being an investor, you really don't have a control over exactly what happens within the company, right? So you have to get into this mode where you have this relationship with the CEO and the rest of the management team, that you can influence them and have a dialogue with them to understand what's going on, and then figure out, along the way, how you want to kind of change course if needed, or accelerate certain things if needed. And that all comes from the fact that you work with somebody for a long time and develop a relationship, just like you would do with your spouse, to kind of negotiate, kind of get to a common ground, and then help kind of accelerate or build the company. You're on mute, Salesh.
Yeah, I think this mentorship is very critical, and thanks for what you guys do. It's not always that we make the right choices. It's not always that all our startups succeed, and still, it's that spirit that on both sides, that we want to make something big and grow. Should keep the human spirit going on both sides, right? Anirudh, do you want to share your experiences with this question around? Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. No, thanks so much, Shailesh, and great to be on the panel. And I think, as Akrit said, it's a pleasure to be here, not just to meet some new folks, but also to reconnect with Akrit and Aditi in particular, both of whom I've now known for almost a decade, as Akrit said, and some great memories from Philadelphia with Aditi, and obviously Bombay with Akrit. So pleasure to be here. I'll tell you a funny thing that Akrit and I were sharing just a couple of days ago. We reconnected, obviously, again on WhatsApp after we were talking about the panel, and Akrit had messaged me, and of course, I responded back asking Akrit if he was a bot, if this was a bot talking to me or him. And of course, he said no. And then I was thinking in my head, I was like, I'm sure Akrit has trained his bot to say no to that answer also. So, but now at least I have him live here in front of me. But anyways, with that said, Shailesh, I'll quickly address. I think I agree with pretty much what Jay mentioned about how you look at which investments to make, which ones not to make. The team is clearly the prerequisite, and I think the quality of the investments that you make depends on your ability to, one, ask the right questions to the team. I think that is one of the things we've been talking about. So you can really understand how they are and how they would be in difficult situations as well. And for us, we try and evaluate and assess whether the founder and the founding team, one, have a complementarity of skill sets, deep passion, and understanding of the problem they're trying to solve. Often we find there's a lot of passion, but then sometimes the understanding is missing, and then that doesn't necessarily bode well either. So we want to see that the founders really have spent time understanding the problem they're trying to solve, and that they're asking the right questions also about the problem. Resourcefulness is a big, I guess, skill that we look for in our founders, and also an openness to feedback and course corrections. Right, as I think many of the founders on the panel have mentioned, they've pivoted multiple times. They've started different startups. They've made lots and lots of different small and major course corrections. So one of the key things we look at is whether the team is actually open to course corrections, because we know that will inevitably happen. And then there are other things, obviously, that I'm sure all of you also know, is we look at obviously the problem the company is trying to solve, the proposed solution, the defensibility of that kind of solution. We always try and assess, okay, 2, 3, 4 years down the line, is this solution, is this problem going to get commoditized, or will it lend itself to building a large defensible company? But in all these questions, unlike the assessment of the team and all the other questions, we always keep a caveat in our heads that we know that the problem that the company is going to solve might change, the solution might change, as you very rightfully asked them, right? The founders, that what were the technologies available 3 years ago, 4 years ago? What are the technologies available today, and how have those evolved? So we keep that in mind, that we know that the problem and the solution might change over time, but it's ideally the core team that will remain the constant over time. So those are some of the things we look at. And in terms of how we help, to be honest, we are early stage investors. So unlike a firm like, for example, where Jay is at, where they have a dedicated department or a division that's focused on helping the portfolio. We sort of in our firm play both, sort of don both hats, right? Which in a way makes our jobs that much more difficult, I would say, but also much more enjoyable. Um, because to be honest, like I've always enjoyed that part of it, like rolling up your sleeves and then saying, okay, how can I now help work with with our founders and help solve some of the problems that they are tackling, right? And so, as the analogy that Jay used of marriage, the only caveat I have there is, in marriage you're supposed to be married only once. Of course, as investors, you have lots of spouses, so to say, so you have to manage your time amongst them as well. And one of the key things is to see, okay, which of your spouses, or better analogy might be babies, need your attention at that time. So we try and dedicate the time where it's most helpful, and help in various things, right? So you obviously we work with not just the founders on strategy, but also in business development, sales. We open up our networks to them, right? Obviously, for initial customers, initial paying customers, that's where, as early stage investors, at least we try and add value. And I think, as you mentioned, Shailesh, we obviously have our eye across, right? We are horizontally sort of more aware, and the startups typically are more sort of siloed in their space and go deep. And so we try and bring that breadth of perspective to them often. And in many cases in our portfolio companies, what we've done is we've said that, listen, you are tackling this part of the problem in this way. Hey, listen, we've just spoken to a company that might be later stage, earlier stage than you, but they're tackling this problem in a different way. Why don't you guys talk? Right? Or we say, hey, listen, I was talking to a large company. We also advise a bunch of large public companies on digital transformations within their existing setups. So often we'll also make those connects. That, listen, large companies looking for this kind of help on, it could be AI, it could be some other problem they're trying to solve. And we say, hey, listen, let's connect the two. Right? So we make a lot of connections. And then finally, I'd say, like, we work with a lot of universities and research centers, right? And and sort of see what's happening on an academia front, what research are research centers at universities undertaking, and where can there be matches there as well. So we sort of play matchmaker as well in many circumstances.
Very nice, very nice, great. Yeah, it's great to see. If I was an entrepreneur and I was in the session today, I think a lot of good insights are coming through. So having a great team, having a lot of character and perseverance, I think will help. Building a great culture will help, and that's how we will succeed. Right? Great. So we are running out of time. So I want Sunshine, if you have any questions from the audience, that'll be great. We can throw that out. I know Akrit has to leave at 8:30. If there's an Akrit question, we can go with that first, and then anybody else.
Okay, so there is one specific Aditi question for Aditi, so I'll keep that for later. And the others are not directed to any panelists specifically. So what I'll do is I'll read those questions, and Shailesh sir, what you can do is you can direct it, you can answer it yourself, or direct it to an appropriate panelist. So first question I have is, how do startup enthusiasts balance scaling up when technology will itself become obsolete or less preferred with the emergence of new migrations?
Yeah, Akrit, you want to take that? Because I think, with so much work that Googles of the world are doing in NLP and all this, and you are in the same space. So how does a AI startup, which is much smaller than a big giant in the same space, kind of create a niche for itself? I think I don't know if I'm rephrasing the question correctly, but I really wanted to know that answer. So I'm just going to rephrase it that way.
No. It's a great question actually, and I showed you my demo first, and then I showed you the demo of GPT-3, which is basically just taken everything that we have done and made it like available for the public through open source APIs, right? So actually, it's so funny, Shailesh. It's a great question because when we started out the company back in 2013, the first question that time we used to get asked is, "Oh, how are you even going to build a chatbot or an AI or an NLP platform that is actually going to work?" And today, the question that we get asked is, "Oh, I can go to open source libraries and build my own AI platform. So what are you doing with your AI platform?" Right? So I think that it absolutely is a great question in terms of how technology gets commoditized. I think that's where, back to the earlier point, we've learned through our mistakes, and ever since the last 2 or 3 years, really started focusing on problems. If you notice my demo, right, we talked about being very domain and vertical specific and building our entire models around just solving for those verticals, those use cases, and making sure that those things are handled better than anybody else. So to your point, Google, and I'm happy to say this, and even we can test it out. Google for sure has a better natural language engine than we do, and definitely if you look at GPT-3, it's better than anything else out there. But if you really wanted to solve an end-to-end, my recharge did not go through telecom use case using natural language engine, I bet we probably do it better than most. Only
Yes.
because we've optimized entirely for it. We focused on it. We have so much data around it. We know what systems it plugs into. We know which systems it will not like. We know where it will go wrong. We know where consumers will actually potentially get confused, and where we should show them multiple options versus one option. So great question, because absolutely we've learned this. I've been, I'm a live example of this exact thing where technology will evolve and change. As long as you're packaging together the right problem for the right customer, right solution that solves the problem for the customer, you'll continue doing well. So
Yep.
that's
Yeah. And Akrit, I think being in India, Google has and Googles of the world have solved this for, let's say, English and German and French and the Chinese languages. But I think between Aditi and you, we have a responsibility to do what we are doing in all the Indian languages also.
yes.
And this is what I call AI for India, if you will, right? We are solving the same problems, but for the Indian audience, which is not English savvy or digital savvy and speech first and all of that. So I
So
think
that goes back, Shailesh, again to being
yeah,
domain focused, right? So let's say I
yeah,
give you the example in a industry vertical. You could take the example of a country. You could take the example of a city. You could take the example of a use case. So you could go to tomorrow
yeah,
and say that, look, I'm going to build the best model for doing lead generation, for example, and solve that. So absolutely, I think that's what it is. Sorry, on that note, I have to go, but
yeah. Thank you, Akrit, for
thank you so
your
much for having
participation.
me, Shailesh, and we'll see you. Bye.
Thank you, Akrit. Yeah, thank
Wonderful.
you. So we'll continue. Sanchayan, do you have any other one more question we can take and then we can close?
Okay, so I have one specific question for Aditi. Should I ask that, or I can
Yeah,
ask a
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, sure. Yeah,
yeah.
you can ask.
So the
Yeah.
question is Imbibe planning to use the data mined interconnections for natural language querying? For instance, how will my grades in linear algebra from class 12 be affected if I perform poorly in my math class in class 5?
Hmm.
So that's exactly what we're doing with this product called Achieve, right? Which is looking at these connections and also looking at so the funny thing is that there is nothing called pure class 10 because class 5 is reflected in class 10, right? So it starts with expertly calibrated and sanitized data. And I think Shailesh picking up from the previous question, right? The presentation comes in of jobs and how deeply contextual and specific do you get in terms of the application and solving the problem. Because we've gone super deep in getting teachers to tag the crap out of, sorry, just, Friday thing, of our content. And because of that stuff, right, we feel that we're ahead of what's happening in the West because there's possibility of expert teachers to calibrate to the extent that we're doing it. So because of all of that context, we have a huge amount of metadata that's allowing us to not only look at the interpolations, the interconnections between these, but we're also able to traverse the graph very effectively. The other thing that's helped us do that is that we don't just have a graph, because the graph is an impression of sensory mining on content, right? We actually have invested a lot of money in collecting data of how students engage with these concepts. So therefore, the paths become even more effectively informed. So that's actually spot on. And if you're somebody who's an enthusiast in getting this done, we're hiring. I had to say
Yep.
that, Cherish. We
Yes.
always have to say that.
Awesome. Very nice. Great. So I think we are out of time, but this was a very interesting conversation. I learned a lot, from my own startup journey. I talked to a lot of founders. I'm really a big fan of, startup is one of the things that everybody should do before they die. It's one of those things, and it builds character, it creates jobs, and it gives you a completely different feeling than just working for somebody. So great to see this discussion and a lot of learning. Thank you to all the panelists. And Geo Institute is going to highly encourage entrepreneurship, as thanks, Sean. And we would love to partner with the startup ecosystem of the country, and both learn from them and contribute to it in many ways. So thank you so much to all the panelists. Over to you, Sanchayan. Thank you.
Thank you to all the panelists, and also thank you, Shailesh sir, for very expertly moderating this session.